Hello and welcome back to Adventurous Way. I'm Diana.
And I'm Matt, and if you're new here on the channel, you may not know that we've been spending the last several months here in Vermont shopping for some raw land that we want to buy and build a house, a home base for our RVing travels. So this has been a journey that we've been on since fall last year, and as always on these journeys there are ups and there are downs, and we like to share all of that story with you, all of the positives and the negatives. So today we're going to share with you one of our big disappointments that we've had on this journey so far, where we put in an offer on some land and sadly that offer did not go through.
We want to share with you as much as we can, but at the same time we want to preserve our privacy. So with that, we're not going to share the location of the property. As you can imagine, real estate transactions are sensitive and involve negotiations. So for that reason, we are sharing our journey more delayed than other videos, which normally are more real time. So this story starts in February when we visited this piece of property for the first time.
That's right. So throughout the winter, we had been using the online portal from our realtor to look at properties online. And then when we found properties that we thought checked all of our requirements, we would head out and visit them. And this is one such piece of property. So we headed out there, it was winter, it was snowy, and we'd seen several other properties that day. Hadn't been super impressed with any of them. None of them had really been quite what we were after when we saw them in person. But we got to this and we thought, oh, this one looks a little bit different.
So this is the fourth property we're seeing today, and I mean, the views here are excellent. I think this is the first property we've seen with really good views.
It's beautiful.
And this is 40 acres.
So it was a little over 40 acres. It had a road leading kind of right up to the property. So access was better than some of the others that we'd seen that day. It was a smaller road, like a class 4 road, but still had this road. It had been ploughed, and the land itself, about what, 2 or 3 acres?
2.3 acres.
2.3 acres had been cleared. So you could actually kind of like see the views and things that the land would have had.
And the views were really cool. And they also had a pond and kind of lean-to structure next to the pond.
Yeah, not that we could see the pond under
Yes.
a couple of feet of snow, but we could see the lean-to. And we headed out and we walked kind of out onto the land and took a sort of a brief walk around. And we kind of thought, yeah, you know what, this could work. It had a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, especially that it was cleared and you could really see the views and you kind of really could imagine where the house could go, where the garden could go, and how it could all work together.
Yeah, so we carried on doing some more research about it. It had fiber internet to the property. It had electric hookups, like electric power poles just there. It checked off kind of all the requirements, no zoning laws. And so a few weeks later, we went back out to visit it, but this time with our realtor. The idea being that we're brand new to this process. Our realtor is kind of helping us to understand what the things we should be really looking for might be, and understand what the potential of the land might be as well. So we went back out with him again in the snow. We met him out there, and we kind of found some of the boundary lines. He walked us around. He told us how he would be thinking about the property. And it was a really useful visit. It kind of showed us a lot that we hadn't really thought of the first time round.
And things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to research online. So for example, the forest. Our realtor told us, because he could see the forest and that the forest had been logged not too long ago. So the trees that are left, I mean, for us, they look perfectly fine trees. It's just for somebody who is knowledgeable, the forest had been logged.
That's right. So roll the clock forward a couple more weeks, and after doing more and more research online and really kind of trying to run down anything that we could to see whether it was suitable or not, we decided to go ahead and put in an offer. So we're playing this fairly safe. So we wanted an attorney who would help us draft that offer. To go in and work with us and with a realtor to get everything kind of buttoned up.
And the reason for that is that at least in Vermont, the offer that you put in is a purchase agreement contract. So as soon as the seller accepts, it becomes a binding contract to buy the land.
Yeah. So we've never been through this process before, so we are far from experts on it, but we have learned a lot about it by going through this process. And one of the things that we learned early on was that once you've signed the contract, you enter into what's called an inspection period or a contingency period, where you go through and you do all the contingencies that you had put into your offer. and you make sure those all pass. Now, if you're buying a house, these might be things like a house inspection, those things. Obviously, when you're buying land, it works a little differently. And there are a number of different things that go into this, but one of the real big ones is the soil test. This used to be a percolation test or a perk test. Nowadays, it's kind of dig a hole and the soil engineer inspects the soil strata to kind of see whether that's an appropriate soil for the septic system and what type of septic system you might need. So that's, as you can imagine, not free. You have to pay to have that done, and it can be a few $1,000s. It can be a fairly significant kind of cost. So, and of course you're digging a hole on the land.
Yes.
So before you can do that, you need to enter into a contract to basically start that ball rolling and make sure you have a commitment from both sides that you want to go ahead with this transaction. So we decided ultimately to go ahead with it, and working with our realtor, we put in an offer. Now, I should add, all of this was actually happening while we were out of state.
Yes.
So we had viewed the property, we'd done all the kind of research and things online, and it was actually when we were in Oregon, just about to head back to Vermont, that we finally decided, yes, we're ready, we want to put in an offer. And all the kind of, therefore, the conversations and things that followed actually happened while we were in the car driving on the road from Oregon back to Vermont. And that is one of the reasons that we were keen to get back pretty quickly. Because when we got back to Vermont, we knew that we were going to have to quarantine, either for 2 weeks or still a week, followed by a negative test result.
Yeah.
So for us, it was really important for us to get back pretty quickly.
But before we could put in an offer, we wanted to have it reviewed by an attorney, because that becomes the purchase contract. But we didn't have an attorney yet, so we had to find a real estate attorney, and people were starting to get busy, and a couple of the attorneys that we called, they were busy and were not accepting new clients. But eventually we found one that...
Highly recommended by someone else, and like everything looked good. We were very happy with her.
And that served that area, because it turns out that real estate attorneys serve a certain area.
Yeah, so we got the attorney, we drafted this offer with her help, and then with the realtor's help, we submitted that offer. And it was rejected, which was kind of a bummer, but we also kind of expected it. What we didn't expect is that it was just sort of rejected outright. There was no counter offer in there at all. And we had gone in kind of below asking, so that wasn't necessarily surprising, but it was kind of a bit disappointing to have not had that counter. So a couple of days later, we went back in with a subsequent offer. And again, it was just rejected outright with no counter. So by this point, we're like, this isn't easy. This isn't turning out the way we wanted things to turn out. We sort of wanted to enter into that negotiation to get a counter offer back that we would kind of know where they stood, but nothing. So in the end, we decided to make a third and final offer, and we went in with that, and they seemed happier with that. Mm-hmm. So we got a response back on the Friday night that the sellers were kind of happy with the price, but they still needed to review some terms with their attorney. And would get back to us in due course. So that, needless to say, that was a fairly tense weekend for us, having put this offer in.
And then the Monday came, and we were excited to hear from them, but unfortunately they told us they accepted a different offer.
Which was a surprise to us, because they'd never mentioned another offer. The property had been on the market for a long time, well over a year. So we were pretty surprised to have found another offer going on at the same time. So I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe our offer prompted a neighbor or something to step in and purchase it. But whatever it was, we missed out, and it went under contract with this other buyer.
And maybe our expectations were too high of getting our first offer, because people say that the market right now is very hot, and people take many rounds, at least for houses, to find the house and get their offer accepted.
And it's kind of hard, because you don't want to get emotionally attached to a property until everything is signed, sealed, and delivered. But at the same time, you do so much research into a property that you start to feel invested in it. When you've started researching everything from the zoning laws to the local schools to where the local amenities and things might be, you've spent a lot of time just reading about it and learning about it. And you just, I think, naturally just develop a kind of an affection for it in that sense. So it was pretty gutting to lose out on it. Yeah.
So we were disappointed about that, but at the same time, those emotions were helpful, because they pointed us towards the kind of aspects of the land that we really, really did not want to give up. So for example, the fact that it was 40 acres, that was really appealing. We were imagining about all the trails that we could make in the woods. So it felt that if we chose a different property that was 10 acres, that we would feel like we were settling down. And that kind of pointed that in the future, we really want to look for something that's more than 10 acres.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about our requirements before finding the property, they're quite, I don't know, like hypothetical. You're imagining all these different things, but you don't really have something to attach that idea to. And so, like Diana says, like once you can see a property that has some or even all of these different things you're after, it really starts to let you think more about what you would do in each of those situations, and honestly, like how important they are relative to one another. Like how important is it to have more acreage than less acreage? We had a fairly wide range that we'd been looking for, and kind of we decided, yeah, we do want the larger acreage. And so yeah, on the back of that process, we came away going, it's given us a really good idea as to what's most important to us.
Yeah.
And that was very useful.
Yeah, like for example, another example. Let's wait for this him to come by. So as soon as we started filming, the tractor came out to mow the lawn, and then we went inside and waited it for a little bit to come down, and then it was quiet, and then we came out to actually start filming, and then he came out again. So yeah, such luck.
But no complaints. It's a beautiful day, and the smell of cut fresh grass, like having been in the desert for the last few years, like honestly, I really miss the smell of fresh grass.
And this is the first, I guess, mow of the spring, so we didn't even think about it. That's a thing we should schedule our filming around.
Yeah, so no complaints. But.
So another example of that is fiber. We got really, really excited about the possibility that a rural piece of property could have fiber. So it kind of changed maybe the priority list, that now, seeing that it is possible, we put fiber much higher on our criteria list.
So on the one hand, it almost felt like we were back to square one and we were back to our search, but in reality, that wasn't the case. We sort of spent some time looking back on what we'd learned from that experience, and in addition to learning about the criteria that mattered most to us, we'd also learned a lot more about the process, and critically, we'd made some really good contacts that would be able to help us move quickly if another property came up that we liked. So although overall the kind of whole experience was pretty disappointing, we were looking forward to having that property, and honestly, getting it earlier in the year would have given us a lot more time to start working on the property. But that wasn't to be. However, we learned so much about the process from that all was not lost, and in particular made some really good contacts. Regardless of which property we ended up buying, we knew we were going to need a good attorney and a good soil engineer. So for us, having made those connections and found people that we trusted was just going to be really useful for the future when we put in our next offer on the next property.
And the reason it is important to have a soil engineer on hand and to do a soil test is because in Vermont, before you can build a house, you have to have a state-issued wastewater permit. So as this property didn't work out and there was limited inventory of properties, we had to expand our search. So one thing that we did, we expanded to include the southern Vermont as well. Also, we found a Vermont map of all the broadband in Vermont. So that kind of expanded to more areas where there is fiber, not just the easy fiber that we knew about. It turns out there are other companies in Vermont that provide fiber in remote areas.
And the other thing we did as well was to kind of change how quickly we had been ruling some properties out. So we knew that we didn't want zoning laws that were going to prevent us using the land that the way that we wanted, in particular around staying in the RV while we were building the land, and also having some RV friends to come and visit. A lot of places seem to have zoning laws that would prohibit that. So early on in our search, given that a lot of towns in Vermont don't have zoning laws at all, we'd been focusing our search exclusively on those towns. But that, like Diana said, given the lack of inventory, that kind of restricted down quite a lot. So one of the other changes we made was to start going through the towns one by one and finding those that had zoning laws, but that wouldn't actually stop us doing the things we wanted. Because honestly, some of the zoning laws were really pretty reasonable. There was nothing kind of crazy in there. And so we kind of figured that was something that we could live with. It wasn't ideal, we'd prefer no zoning laws, but if we expanded our search to also include those towns that had them, but would allow us to do what we wanted, that's probably okay.
So although it was disappointing for our first property to fall through, we still learned a lot and we are even better set up for our next property.
That's right. So if you did enjoy this video and you want to learn more about our property search and whether we find some land to build our home base, be sure to subscribe and we will see you in the next video.
I don't think we should have big meadows to mow.
No. One man went to mow a meadow. 5 men, 4 men, 3 men, 2 men, 1 man and his dog Spot went to mow a meadow.
Was the dog helpful in mowing?
I don't know, I think this is 1 man and his Ford went to mow a meadow.
But hey, a small tractor can mow quite a lot of land.
Yeah, I think, what did we say that was? That was like a 20 horsepower tractor? Something around that?
But like old, like
Oh
50
yeah,
something
Ford
years.
1600.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, maybe there's a tractor in our future.
we'll see.
Oh, it is a nice looking lawn.
It is, and if we have lawn, like look how small an area that tractor is still awesome for.
That's true, yeah.
But again, having the smaller tractor, like if you have the big tractor, that would tear up that grass.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely thinking more wild meadows, if we have any meadows, than
Yeah.
lawns, but you know, even the meadow, you have to, I think, mow it once a year.
Yeah.